everyone. Thanks again for joining Totango's webinar. As we allow people to join in, I'll go ahead and share a few important items with you. So my name is Christine Paulson. I'm the Marketing Director at Totango. We're excited to feature a new webinar in our Customer Success Summit webinar series. We had a huge event back in March with over 50 speakers and over 1,000 attendees. And due to popular demand and the feedback we received, is we've invited some of the best speakers back to give a deeper dive on their topic that they presented at Customer Success Summit. So before introducing today's topic and speaker, here are a couple important items. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, go ahead and submit your question in the bottom left corner of your screen in the chat window. We're aiming for about 45 minutes, about 30 minutes of presentation, and 15 minutes for Q&A. If you're having any audio issues, go ahead and check your network connectivity. And lastly, we are recording today's session, and the replay link will be shared shortly thereafter. So okay, with all that said, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Here with me today is Whitney Hillyer, Director of Customer Success at Bitly. She'll be presenting Land and Expand, How to Increase Revenue with Customer Success. I'll now turn it over to her. Whitney?
Hey everyone, and thanks Christine and the rest of the Totango team. I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk about one of my absolute favorite topics, which is how your customer success team can grow revenue and be responsible for revenue within your organization. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. As Christine mentioned, feel free to send through your questions. We've got plenty of time for questions at the end. I'll also put up my email address at the end too, so if it's something we don't get to, feel free to email me as well, because like I said, I love talking about this. It's one of my favorite topics. So with that, just to give you guys a little bit of background about me. So as Christine mentioned, I'm the Director of Customer Success here at Bitly. Bitly is headquartered in New York, so I live in New York about 4 years now by way of Atlanta. So if you hear a southern twang come out every now and then, a few y'alls here and there, that would be why. And I run the team here at Bitly. We have 7 people on our team right now. We have 5 new people starting in the next 6 weeks, so very, very excited about that. And we are actively hiring, so if you like what you hear today, this is a shameless plug to check out the jobs that are open on our website, because we are looking for rock stars to join the team. So to give you a little bit of background about Bitly, because I think when we talk about customer success teams, and especially around growing revenue, it's really, it's very different product by product and team by team. So to give you a little bit of background on Bitly, we launched in 2008. We are a SaaS company to solve an issue that was happening on the internet, right? Links were too long to put in on Twitter. They were too long to be in social media. So we built a fairly generic link shortener back in 2008 and have grown to really be the market leaders in the field. So we now have 60 employees, 3 offices, New York, Denver, and San Francisco. We have about 1,200 enterprise clients. So if you do the math on that, we've got 7 people handling about 1,200 enterprise clients. You can see why we are hiring so quickly. My reps are handling a lot of clients per CSM. So and focusing obviously heavily on expansion. And then we have about 700,000 active monthly free users. And our free users, I point that out because our free user support actually falls under our team as well. So that's something that we're handling day to day as well. So what I thought I'd do today is really walk you through sort of the story of what happened at Bitly and how we transformed over the last year and a half to really have the customer success or part of our organization really focus on expansion and the results we saw from that. I think what I have seen in the industry and the more and more people I talk to is that there are more customer success teams focusing on expansion. I think when customer success first started, it was a little bit faux pas for them to be doing, quote unquote sales or upsells. So just want to share with you today our story and not necessarily saying that it's the right way or the only way, but it's just sort of the way we've done it at Bitly and the success that we've seen. So at the end of 2013, I'm sure none of you have ever seen a graph that looks like this, but the CEO pulled us all into a room and said, hey, here's what the sales projections need to be for next year. So we all sat in a room for about a half day looking at, sort of where the hockey sticks numbers needed to be for 2014. and tried to figure out, what are the best strategies for us to get there. And what we found pretty quickly was that the biggest opportunity lay within our existing customer base. So, for example, we had all of these amazing customers, but we weren't very deep within any of the organizations. So if I take a company like Pepsi, for example, we worked with Pepsi and like Pepsi proper, that brand, but Pepsi owns, 10, 15, 20 other brands, right? They own Gatorade and Mountain Dew and Cheetos and all of these other brands that we weren't working with. So we were only working with one subset. Or you take a company like IBM and, we worked with, one small group within IBM, but we weren't working with the rest of the team. And so what we really found was, to get to that hockey stick growth number, we were going to spend a lot of time focusing on expansion within our existing customer base. So then we had to we looked at that, we decided that was what we were going to do, and then we decided, what we really had to do was we had to formalize the rules between sales and success. We had to kind of rewrite, what had been happening traditionally here. So we formalized what we call the rules of engagement, right? What does sales get? What does success get? And I love this gift because, I think it goes to show, I think there is sort of that natural tension there, especially when we're talking about upsell. We've all experienced it. So we really had to write these rules down. We had to formalize them, and we had to put together a formal document that could be referenced. And so what we decided, at least for the time being, for 2014, what we were going to try is sales was still responsible for all of the new logo sales, right? So any new business. And customer success would own expansion completely within any existing customer. Now, that sounds, pretty normal. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. What was a little bit different that we did is we actually looked at the parent account level and not just at the account level. So, for example, within to keep going with the Pepsi example, we were working with Pepsi. It was now customer success job to basically put together a use case of what we were doing with Pepsi and go out and talk to Mountain Dew and Cheeto and Frito-Lay. So it wasn't just our job to, add additional users under an existing account, although we did do that as well, but it was really our job to potentially even go out and pitch these new brands under an existing parent company. So that's how we decided that we were going to do it, at least, for a short term to try it out and see what the results were. So I'm going to talk a little bit for a second about the strategy. So once we made the decision we were going to do that, we wrote down the rules, who was going to own what. We obviously had to put a strategy in place to do that because this wasn't something that customer success had been responsible for in the past. And I'm going to go into a little bit detail into each one of these, but at a high level, the first big point was we were going to train our customer success managers in sales, so we were going to actually put them through formal sales training. And we decided that we were also, from now going forward, anyone we hired, we were looking for them to either have some sales background or had been doing substantial upselling and cross-selling in their previous role. We were going to identify the upsell levers. And then we were going to tier accounts based on those levers, which I'll show you how we did that in a second. We were going to set aggressive goals. And by goals here, I actually mean meeting and email targets. Again, we'll get into that a little bit more. And then we rebuilt the comp plan. So these were sort of our 5 strategic initiatives on how we were going to, get the success team really responsible for expansion and, working towards those goals. So the first one, training and hiring. So I mentioned this on the previous slide, but we actually had an outside sales trainer come in to Bitly and train our CSMs on sort of the art of sales. So everything from prospecting to negotiation, closing, they actually taught our customer success team all of that. And we're actually going through it again now about a year later to make sure that everyone feels really comfortable with it. And we try to do it a little bit from the angle of, account expansion versus new sales. So that was the first piece, the training. And then this is actually a screenshot of the job description that's up right now on our website. You guys can check it out. But you can see minimum of 2 years of SaaS customer success or account management experience, minimum of 1 year inside or outside sales experience. So we are looking for people who have done some selling in their past. Good to hear them. So then the second thing was identifying our levers. And these are the levers at Bitly, right? So we have the number of links you're making. We have the number of users you have in your account. And then BSD stands for branded short domain. So that's sort of our abbreviation for a new account. So somebody who wants to add a whole nother account. I think identifying the levers is one of the first and foremost most important things if you're going to go to your CEO or go to your VP of sales and say, hey, we want our customer success team to be responsible for revenue. You have to be able to walk them through the levers and how much money, revenue is associated with each lever and how you're going to look at your team. And these were our three. And I think it's also really important for you to understand, do you have 3 levers or do you have 50 levers? Because a lot of people I talk to, every little thing can be sold off piecemeal and certain customizations, and that makes, doing this harder. But for us, there was only 3, so it's fairly simple. And then we tiered our accounts. So I think the way most people traditionally tier their accounts is just by revenue size, right? They're going to spend more money with us. They're considered tier 1. We actually didn't look at it that way. We actually looked at it strictly by growth potential. So, for example, you could have a customer like, a good example of this from our user base is Visa. So Visa is a big customer of ours. We love them, but they don't have a ton of growth potential for us. We already have all of their global markets. We have a lot of their different business units. They're not going to buy additional accounts. They might buy users within their existing account, but those are less expensive than buying additional accounts. So they might be more of a tier 2. So you can see here medium growth potential, maybe adding users. And then down here we have the high growth potential. So those are accounts. So those are like the NBC Universals of the world, the CBSs, Turner Broadcasting, right? So those are people who are going to have very separate business units, very separate accounts that we can sell into because those are the most high value to us. Those are going to bring in the most revenue. So that's how we tiered our customers. And then we set up our CSMs to match that, right? So if a CSM has a lot of tier 3 clients, they can handle a lot more tier 3 clients because they're not actively searching out revenue within those. Whereas if I have usually a senior CSM who's handling tier 1 clients, they're going to have a lot less clients because they're really focused on expansion. And a lot of those, have traditional sales cycles. So you have to, you have to kind of go in knowing that those are going to take longer and have longer deal cycles. And the next one was aggressive goal setting. So this is actually a screenshot of our tracking report from Yesware, which is just the email tracking service we use. But what we did with this was we went back and we looked at the CSMs who had been most successful and even the sales reps who had been most successful in the past. And what we came up with were 3 major numbers. So for us, the first one was 100. So my reps who were doing great and hitting all of their goals, as well as the sales reps, they're sending about 100 client emails per week. So that's sort of the benchmark that I give my team. The next was 10 client meetings per week. And again, this is going to be different for every company, but for us, 10 client meetings a week, about a half an hour each. That was usually helping people get to their goal. And then the last was 4 in-person meetings a month. I know I'm sort of preaching to the choir when I say that, being in person definitely helps close deals. So really pushing the reps to sort of get out and meet with more clients was something that we were going to push for as well. This is actually a quote from one of my reps that I received probably about 6 months ago via chat, and she just wrote, I guess you were right about email and call volume relating directly to upsells. Who knew? So, I think it was one of those things where we were really trying to increase activity and that those things naturally followed, right? The more you're talking to your customers, the more they're going to sort of naturally, you're going to learn about opportunities that you would have never known it existed. And then we rebuilt the comp plan. A lot of people asked me after my Totango talk about how our comp plan was structured. So what we did was we obviously made sure that our base salaries were still very competitive within the market. Then we actually have a team-based bonus, and that's a net churn number. So as long as we have net negative churn, you're going to make 100+% of that number as a team. And this really gets the team to rally behind each other, which is awesome. It also protects you against outliers, which is nice. And then we did build in a commission percentage. So if you're going to, have your team focused on revenue and revenue growth, you have to sort of comp them in that way too. One of the biggest complaints I get from CSMs who are applying for jobs, and I ask them about their current structure, is that they feel like they're doing a lot of upselling, but they're not getting comped for it. So they either have, a ceiling which they can't go past, or they're having to transfer it over to the sales team, but it's basically already won at that point. The salesperson's getting commission, they're not. It's definitely a big point of frustration. So we wanted to make sure that we eliminated that. The other point that's worth mentioning here is it also allows us to get really good talent. because, again, like our base and bonus structure is still, fairly industry average, but this commission percentage is completely uncapped. So it's sort of, for the right rep who likes doing this, they can make a lot of money, which is, something that would be really valuable for this type of employee. Okay, cool. So now that I've walked you through all of the strategy and all that, how did we do? So I'm going to take you through our results for 2014, and all of which have continued into 2015, but just for ease sake, we'll walk you through what 2014 looked like. So the first thing that happened is over the course of the year, we saw a 267% increase in upsell. So by sort of formalizing the upsell process, making it a focus, making sure there's strong rules of engagement, and pulling it a little bit out of sales hands and into more of the CSM's hands, 267% increase in upsells. That contributed 33% of all the new MRR for the company. So we brought in a third of the revenue, new revenue for the company. And one of the cool things that happened along with that was we really got a much bigger seat at the table. I know that a lot of people, that I talk to, their sort of concern is, hey, we're kind of this redheaded stepchild of sales. No one really thinks about us until there's a problem, right? Until there's churn. But at the point where you're bringing in a third of all the company's new revenue, you have a much bigger voice, a much bigger seat at the table. And lastly, and this one I think a lot of people think is a little bit counterintuitive, but we actually decreased churn by 25%. A lot of people tell me, if you guys are focused on expansion, your churn numbers are going to go up. We actually found the complete opposite was true. And I think what it really is it's really because we were being much more proactive with our customers. In order to find those areas for expansion, we were talking to them a lot more. And by talking to them a lot more and being more proactive in our outreach, we were able to uncover problems sooner that we were able to address. So just sort of a graphical representation of what I was talking about. So in 2013, our upsell basically equaled our churn rate. So we were sort of just net neutral. We weren't losing money. We weren't really bringing in money. Then in 2014, with this sort of shift of focus, our upsell now equaled 3x of our churn rate. So suddenly, again, much bigger seat at the table. Our growth lines, were substantial because we are a SaaS company. So a lot of these companies, customers, while they might sign up, and add additional user seats, they're also renewing with those user seats. So, that's just exponentially growing. So why did it work? So the first one is I firmly believe that CSMs have increased knowledge compared to the sales team when it comes to growing existing accounts. So, a few examples here, right? Being able to go into a client meeting with, let's just say, Mountain Dew, to continue with my Pepsi example. If I can go in and I can actually demo the live Pepsi account for them and walk them through the success that Pepsi's had and send them a case study, but it's not just a generic case study. It's a case study that has the Pepsi data in it. It's so much more tangible for them. They can see the results that a company, like it's a sister company, it's just like them, right? It's not a generic test account. It's not sort of the hopes and dreams of, hey, here's what we can expect to see. It's actually what, a company that they trust and are part of has already seen. So we have that increased knowledge. We also have it when it comes to things like legal and the contract procurement process. We know what it looks like. We either already have the MSA in place, we already have pricing in place. All of those things can really, really help in this case. There's also a decrease in time and frustration. So at Bitly, we really try to focus our reps even on a monthly basis. We want, deals closing as quickly as possible. We look at revenue, obviously quarterly and annually, but we also look at it monthly. And so even things, passing deals back and forth between sales and success is so frustrating for the client. They get on the phone with our team and they'll say, hey, we really, we're interested in expanding you to 3 other regions, so we want 3 additional users. And then we say, oh, great, hold on, thanks for letting me know. I'm going to now transfer you to the salesperson, who then the client has to then re-talk to, give them all the background, and then when the salesperson is done closing them, they have to send them back to us to get everybody set up and onboarded. It just can be a fairly clunky process that just in our case wasn't necessary. We were adding days on either end of those. When we would have a conversation with a client, we would introduce them to the salesperson would set up a call with them, then they would transfer them back. We're talking about days here, which does matter when you're talking about monthly numbers, and it was very frustrating for the client. We also had a few horror stories, which I'm sure everyone on this phone or everyone on this call has probably experienced, where a sales rep would tell a client, oh, here's your price, and it would be different potentially than the price that somebody else had, and then you've got your client calling you saying, why are they offered this price and we were offered this price, right? So there were definitely some sort of, or we would have gone 3 months through procurement when we didn't actually have to because we already had an MSA in place. So there were definitely some horror stories internally, but it was also very frustrating for the client externally. It was a huge increase in activity, right? So giving people those tangible numbers that they were supposed to hit and, made them become more proactive versus being very reactive. So, historically because there were so many accounts per rep and they weren't tiered, they weren't focused, it was very much of just, hey, let's support people as they come in. I've got these new clients I've got to onboard. I've got these, existing clients that I have to help support and troubleshoot. They're having issues. That's what we were spending all of our time doing. But now when these reps have these very tangible goals, in terms of account expansion, they've got to go out and they've got to figure out where they're going to get that money from. And, and what that is they spend a lot of time on the phone just checking in with clients that they wouldn't have necessarily checked in with, but they want to check in with them because they want to make sure, one, if I go to a sister company, are they going to give me a good reference? But also maybe I can get an introduction from them. Things like that. So it was a fairly substantial increase in activity from the reps. Money. So money talks, right? When you suddenly give your reps sort of this uncapped commission structure for part of their bonus, they're able to go out and bring in a lot of money because they want that in their check every month. So that obviously sort of changed the tide a little bit for us as well. And lastly, having those strong rules of engagement. It's really, really important to write out the rules, set them down, set them in stone, because otherwise you're going to have this problem with the sales reps and the CSMs. Because when you start a process like this, the sales reps do tend to get a little upset. This was what they considered low-hanging fruit, and now you're sort of moving that away from them. So they sometimes bank on that a little bit, probably a little bit more than they should. But having strong rules of engagement then allows you to go back, reference a document, and say, no, here are the rules of engagement. If you worked on this deal, that's kind of on you because, you knew the rules and you didn't follow them. It just sort of helps with, morale and making sure everybody knows what the playing field is. This is a quote that I love, and it's about renewals, but I think it's also very, very much about upsells. So initial purchase decisions are based on hope. Renewal decisions are based on experience. That is 100% true for upsells, and it's also why success should be responsible for upsells. When people buy a product originally, especially like a SaaS product, right, they're told by the salespeople, here are all the ways this is going to help you. When people are buying additionally, you've already proven the value. They believe in you. They believe in the value. They've adopted the product. And if you're talking to a sister company who hasn't, they're able to see the success from another group within their organization. So, the CSMs are responsible for this entire thing. They're responsible for the experience of the client. And if the client has a good experience, they're way more likely to buy more from you. So this, in my mind, just sort of encompasses exactly why customer success should be handling account expansion. So one of the questions I got after the Totango conference was, did we make any changes in 2015? And we actually did. So I'm going to walk you guys through those briefly. So the big changes is we introduced this concept called strategic accounts. So what strategic accounts was we basically paired together an enterprise rep, a senior CSM, and they got 10 accounts. And those accounts were made up of both existing parent accounts and new business. Now, the existing accounts that we chose for these had to have 10+ brands associated with them. So the NBC Universals of the world, the Turner Broadcasting, the P&G, Johnson & Johnson. And basically what we decided was those companies had so much opportunity that it was worth having two people focus on them. And really the reason we were able to do this was because we just double comped. So we basically said, hey, you guys go out, you work these deals together, big fan of team selling, we're going to comp everybody on it. So it was sort of a win-win all around. So we started this, and again, it was, at the time we only had 4 enterprise sales reps. So we're really only talking about 40 accounts across the organization. And only, I think about 15 of those were existing accounts. The rest were new business. So it's sort of, while we changed the program, we changed it very slightly. And then in terms of the results we've seen, honestly, it's just too soon to tell. Unfortunately, people always ask, is this working? We haven't, honestly, from a customer success perspective, seen that much of a difference in behavior. So the deals that have closed under these strategic accounts were probably, at least from an existing business side, were probably deals that would have closed anyway. But we are putting more of a focus on those strategic accounts and trying to work them from a team selling approach. So lastly, and I only have 2 more slides, I promise, because I know we're about to run out of time. Why is this so important? So, when you look at a technology company, specifically in SaaS, and this is a graph about why churn is so critical in SaaS, and there's a link there if people want to check it out. And it's a really great article. But it really just goes to show you, and this is over a 5-year period, but when you're, if you bring in, a 2.5% churn rate, which I think all of us would be extremely happy with only 2.5%. In churn, it goes to show you after 5 years sort of where you're going to land. If you don't churn anybody, right, you're still along this line. And then that green line up there is, if all we're talking about is a 2.5, a net negative churn of 2.5, look at how that exponentially grows over time. And now when you're starting to get into the bigger numbers of the 110% net negative churn, 120% net negative churn, that's where you're really going to see your valuation skyrocket as a company. Investors are looking at these numbers. They're looking at churn numbers. They're looking at upsell numbers, and they're really looking at all of those things together, net negative churn, right? So, a 2%, and this is from that same article, a 2% increase in upsell leads to a 28% increase in valuation. So it is something that we should all be thinking about. It is something we should all be focusing on, and something that we've definitely made a focus here at Bitly. So with that, I know we're going to transfer over for questions and open it up a little bit. So I hope you guys all wrote in. But again, wanted to give out my email address as well before we start asking questions. So if you've got to jump off, or if you want to talk to me directly about any specific use cases, feel free to shoot me an email, shoot me a note on LinkedIn. I love talking about this, as you can all see. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out if we can't get to your question today.
Great. Thank you, Whitney. And as she just said, we're going to go into Q&A. So in the bottom left corner of your screen is the chat box. Go ahead and submit any of your questions there. And so Whitney, we already have quite a few submitted. I'll go ahead and start with one. So one person wanted to know, when you made the model change where your CSMs took on the expansion sales, did you get resistance from your existing CS team or your sales team for that shift? And then how did you guys, from a management level, handle that resistance?
Yeah, sure. No, that's a really good question, and definitely one that we get a lot. So we didn't have a lot of resistance from the CS team. We did have one success manager at the time who was really not very interested in selling, and she actually ended up leaving us, unfortunately, because she was very good at her job. But a lot of the rest of the CSMs, I think, were really excited for the new opportunity more than anything else. I think everyone, sort of wants to grow in their career, and the ability to get formal sales training and to, sort of build out that new skill set was something that everyone really embraced for the most part. So people were really excited about that. And then also, like I said, we also did make a lot of hires. And, even today when I get on the phone with, a potential new hire, as a phone screen before an interview, it's the first thing I tell them. I tell them about the model of the team. I tell them that we are a very expansion-focused customer success team, and that because there are a lot of success managers out there who do not want anything to do with selling. And I've had a lot of people who I thought were really good from a resume perspective who have been like, hey, not really interested in, having a quota and doing things like that. And that's totally okay, but it's also why I make sure it's one of the first things that I talk about. when we have an interview. From the sales team, I think that was probably the bigger challenge, right? The sales team definitely, looked at this as, here's my low-hanging fruit and you guys are taking it away from us. Really what we did was we positioned it in a way that, the company is always king, right? And this was a decision we were making on behalf of the company at the company level. I had a lot of executive support for this. Our CEO was completely behind it. Our CRO was completely behind it. So I had a lot of sort of executive sponsors who were behind this, which really, really, really helped. And then the other thing we did with that was we basically said to them up at the front, hey, we're going to test this out. We're going to try it for a quarter or two. If it doesn't work, we'll go back to the way things were. But it worked, and it worked really well. And then it just became the new norm, I think, at that point. So hopefully that was a long-winded answer to your question.
No, that's great. Another question is when you described Bitly's 3 levers, one question is, can you talk through how you came to those specific levers? You mentioned some companies might have 50. You guys have 3. How did you get to those?
Yeah, so, I think it just depends on your product, right? What could we sell that was additional? So, some companies have, multiple level, like there's, analytics companies out there that have, there's like 10 different levels of analytics. You can have basic analytics, advanced, et cetera. So it's really what does your product look like and what are those things within the product that you can sell more of? Or sort of, it's kind of a feature set, right? What features can you add or take away so that you can bundle those sets together so that you can say, hey, a customer who's at this highest end, our biggest enterprise deal, what do they have that some of the smaller guys don't have? Is it additional accounts? Is it additional users? Is it, more advanced analytics? Is it, a lot of companies I talk to have, like consulting hours, additional support. What are all those different levers that your team has that they can sort of sell or add value to the customer?
Okay, and then I think there's a few questions for clarification. Is what is BSB? Could you explain that again?
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't have a good way to really explain that. So a BSD in Bitly world is a branded short domain, which is basically our representation of an account. So, for example, what you get with Bitly Brand Tools, which is our enterprise subscription model, is, for example, ESPN is a client. So instead of their links branding bit.ly, they brand es.pn. So that's one of the big features of our enterprise solution. So if they want a different branding for ESPN in Grantland, they have to buy a separate account for that. Or if Pepsi wants to brand separate than Mountain Dew, which of course they do because they're separate brands, they're going to buy a separate account for that. So it's just that's sort of our abbreviation for an account.
Okay, and a couple questions about your team structure. So do you segment your team regionally as well as by the company and brand size?
So we do not segment regionally yet, although we are getting to that point. We are opening a San Francisco office in about 4 days, and so we're going to be moving toward a more regional model. And that's just in all honesty because our sales team was never regionalized. I think once the sales team becomes more regionalized, success will naturally become more regionalized, but we haven't done that historically. It's basically been tiering our customers based on expansion potential and then and size and revenue size of the company. So we segment between what we consider enterprise accounts and corporate accounts, and that's based on the revenue of that company.
Great. And then just to clarify what the changes in 2015, someone wanted to know about that enterprise rep. Is that part of your CS team or part of your sales team?
Yeah, the enterprise rep is part of our sales team. So it's an account executive on the enterprise side. So companies over $1 billion or more are the ones that they're selling into. So it's basically one CSM with one sales rep. And we actually have an SDR paired with those guys as well. So a sales development rep who's helping them, reach out to prospects, set meetings, things like that. So it's sort of, they work as a little bit of a unit.
Okay, and then someone would like to know the volume of accounts each of your CS handle. How do you split the volume?
Yeah, so they're all handling a lot of accounts right now, and it is based on the tier. So my senior CSMs are handling a lot right now. Ideally, they'd be handling probably about 50. That's kind of what we're trying to get to with all the open hires. And then my CSMs are handling about 100 each. And I think that's probably a good number for them because they're handling more of the Tier 2 and Tier 3 accounts, which we obviously have more of, but they also need sort of less legwork on the sale most of the time.
Okay, great. And then if in a case where the customer has promised to purchase more licenses or move to a higher plan in a couple of months, will sales be receiving any part of the comp? And then probably by marking the account as a named account. Can you explain that process?
Sure. So, okay. I sorry, rereading the question. So yes, you're for those specific ones. If there is a specific client who during the sales process says, hey, we're going to buy, one license now just to get the paperwork and everything out of the way, and then we're going to buy these 2 additional licenses, in 3 months. The reps have 6 months to actually close those deals in order to get commission off of them. So they also have to be very well documented. It can't just be anything. It has to be a very documented, management-approved case where somebody says, hey, let's go ahead and get this one deal done now, and then the other ones will shortly follow. So sales does get to keep those deals for 6 months. Anything after 6 months, even if it's documented, even if it's management approved, that goes to the CSM team. So in that case, it does work that way. I think there was a second half to that question. Can you repeat it, Christine?
Yeah, it was about maybe your systems, about how you go ahead and flag or mark those accounts. Is there any?
Oh, the named account?
Yeah, the named account.
Yeah, so the way we define named accounts at the beginning is they have to have 10 plus brands associated with them, and they have to be approved by management. So again, let the Johnson & Johnson, NBC Universals of the world, with really physically separate brands. And then so that's how and then in terms of flagging them, we just have a marker in Salesforce. So we can pull, these are strategic accounts, so that, again, we can make sure that the comp is correct and all that kind of stuff.
Great, and a lot of people love that you did the plug on that you're hiring, and some people are asking if you're expanding to Canada, and if someone in Seattle could submit and work remotely.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty flexible and open. So, if you guys are interested, my email address is up there. It's just Whitney@Bitly. So feel free to shoot me a note, and we can talk offline about that.
Great. Okay, and then a new question just came in about so when sales actually closes a new business deal, what is that handover process like to a CSM for your team?
Yeah, sure. So at Bitly, it's fairly easy, right? So the sales rep will send the client an email and say, hey, here's a copy of the countersigned agreement, whatever. We're really excited. Welcome to Bitly. I've CC'd your customer success manager, Madeline, and she will be following up with next steps on getting you guys set up. And then our CSMs at that point will just respond directly and start working with the client. And then there usually will be a 5 to 10 minute conversation that happens between the sales rep and the CSM. We all sit right next to each other, so it's a fairly easy thing to do. It's not super structured about, the background on the client, why they bought, what they're interested in, what the sales process was like, any issues, any red flags, anything like that. So again, it's a fairly simple process. It's not, we didn't have a need to formalize anything too serious. And usually we can get these customers up and running within hours and trained within days. So our onboarding process for new customers is very quick and fairly painless from a CSM perspective.
Awesome, great. And if anyone has any other questions, it looks like we have about maybe 4 minutes left. So what percentage of revenue does Bitly forecast from expansion deals? And if this person works for a small company where that expansion percentage is small, so would you recommend this model where customer success is responsible for expansion?
Yeah, so we forecast right now about basically what we saw in 2014, so about 33%. So basically we'll come up with what are the sales goals for for the quarter. We'll basically take 33% of that, or basically a third. We'll usually also then look at what we're expecting our churn rate to be, which is I think pretty normal for most companies. But we'll sort of take into consideration the churn percentage in the goal setting, and then we'll take a third of what the revenue the net new MRR that we're looking to bring in as a company. So we have been historically taking about a third. The nice thing is, because we've been doing this for over a year now, is we've gotten pretty good at it in terms of, I know when I bring on a new senior CSM and they're fully ramped, I know about what they're going to be bringing in each quarter if they're doing a good job, and same thing on the CSM side. So really I'm in that position now where, my CEO asks me like once a week, how can we get you from 30% to 50%, which we would of course love to do. But that's really just a body thing. Like, my people are totally maxed, and so as we hire these new people, I feel fairly confident that we've put in a system that can be reproduced. So what those CSMs will be able to bring in. In terms of would I recommend the model? I mean, I think you just have to find your own niche. You have to you have to try it. You have to see what are we talking about. If one of the things I was very blessed with when I came into the organization was we had an amazing client base that tended to be fairly untapped. So, walking into I think we had about 600 customers when I started. Walking into that and having this great client base to be able to start from is very different than a company that may only have 10 or 15 customers. So I would still say this is important, and it's important to put the structure in place now, because you'll get to that point where you're 200, 300, 400 customers, and so making sure the structure is in place to handle that, I think, is very important. But what percentage of that's going to be for any company? I mean, that's going to differ based on what your offerings are and the way the teams are structured.
Okay, so we got a few more that came in. So one person's curious if you have a support team. So, for CSMs that handle those low-touch customers, do they answer support issues as well, or is there a separate support team at Bitly?
Yep, so we do not have a separate support team. So basically every client of ours, Bitly doesn't have what I know a lot of people on the phone probably have, which are, this large group of customers that pay like a very, very low rate, right? So the people who are paying like $50, $25 a month, things like that. We don't actually have a group of people like that. Everyone's at a fairly high, sort of enterprise-y level, and they all get customer success managers, and the customer success manager owns every aspect of the client. So they own all of the support. They own everything. The only support team we have is for our free users. So they actually go into like a ticketing system. They have an email alias. They obviously don't have a point of contact at Bitly. But from a customer perspective, all of those are handled directly with the CSM, because a lot of times what we find is within those support questions, we're able to find, either one, we will flag them as a churn risk based on some of the issues they're having, or two, we find really easy areas for expansion, even within that call. Hey, looks like you guys are sort of hacking the way that our user management is supposed to work. Here are some ways that you could fix that issue. So being able, it's really important, I think, at least at Bitly, that we know everything that's going on with that client, and that the CSMs are able to work with that client on everything, and that they only have one point of contact.
Great. And then you mentioned that it used to be a faux pas for CSMs to focus on upsell. And why do you think that's changed? And did any of your specific customers or clients view that shift in a negative way?
Yeah, so I think it's not necessarily that it was a faux pas. I probably did use that word, but more that I think people used to look very negatively on it, and I think that's shifting. And I think it's shifting for a couple of reasons. I think people are starting to realize the frustration from a customer perspective of all of the pinging back and forth, and not just having one point of contact. And as a customer, that can be really frustrating, and sometimes having frustrated clients are the reasons that they leave. We don't need to give our customers any more reason. I think all of us can agree that we should never be giving our customers more reason to leave us or making them more frustrated. So I think that's part of it. And the other thing is, I think that people have started to see the results that I have. I know at the Totango, one of the keynotes was from TSIA, and what he saw was the same thing we saw, right? Which is that I think people historically thought if you were focusing on expansion, you were neglecting other areas of product, whether that be adoption, onboarding, or retention. And that's just not actually the case. I mean, what you saw, we decreased churn by 25%, and a lot of other organizations are seeing the same way that I've talked to have said, hey, yeah, we were originally worried that churn was going to go up if we did this, and it's actually gone down. So I think that that's sort of what has helped sort of move people into this new way of thinking.
Great. Thank you, Whitney. And I think we'll go ahead and end on that question. I want to thank everyone that has joined us today, and thank you, Whitney, for that great presentation. And on your screen, you'll go ahead and see Totango's website and an email, info@totango.com, if you would like to learn more about our customer success solution. And as Whitney shared earlier, her email address if you have any specific. And if with that, we'll go ahead and end the meeting, and we hope you have a great day. Thanks, guys.